Have you ever stopped to think about the silent weight that many people carry every day? Henry David Thoreau, in one of his most impactful reflections, stated, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." This phrase, written in the 19th century, resonates with an almost frightening force today. We live in an era of technological advancements, global connectivity, and seemingly infinite possibilities. But paradoxically, we have never been so overwhelmed by a sense of emptiness. It's as if we are trapped in a routine that consumes us, an existence that, while functional, seems to lack true purpose. And the most unsettling part? Often this desperation is silent, hidden behind forced smiles, perfect social media posts, and a packed schedule that keeps us busy but not fulfilled. This feeling of wasting life is something that, at some point, we all face. It's that moment when you find yourself asking, "Is this it? Is this how my life is supposed to be?" Perhaps it's at the end of an exhausting day when you realize that, despite all the effort, you don't feel like you're moving forward. Or maybe it's when you compare your life to others, feeling like you're falling behind, even without knowing exactly where you're supposed to be going. This restlessness, this internal struggle, is something that Phillips Brooks brilliantly described. The great struggle of life is between what we are and what we ought to be. And that's exactly what makes this issue so universal and timeless. All of us, on some level, feel this tension between our current self and our ideal self. It's as if there's a version of ourselves, braver, more fulfilled, more authentic, that is constantly calling us, but that, out of fear, insecurity, or simply the inertia of routine, we end up ignoring. And so we keep living, often on autopilot, trying to fill this void with temporary distractions, but never really addressing the root of the problem. But why does this happen? Why do so many people feel trapped in a life that doesn't seem to truly belong to them? And more importantly, how can we escape this silent desperation and start building a life that is truly worth living? These are the questions we will explore today. Because deep down, we all have the potential to transform ourselves, to break free from this sense of stagnation, and to move closer to that version of ourselves we so deeply wish to be. The question is, are we willing to face this struggle? If the internal struggle between what we are and what we ought to be is inevitable, the first step to escaping this silent desperation is to recognize that something needs to change. It sounds simple, but in practice, it's one of the most difficult challenges we face. Carl Jung, one of the greatest thinkers of modern psychology, left us with a powerful truth. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. And here lies the paradox. To transform our lives, we must first confront, without filters or excuses, what is causing us pain. We must accept that something isn't working, that there is a disconnect between the life we live and the life we wish to live. But how do we know it's time to change? Often the signs are right in front of us, but we choose to ignore them. Feelings like regret, guilt, anxiety, or even depression don't arise out of nowhere. They are like internal alarms, trying to alert us that something is out of balance. Perhaps you feel a constant weight in your chest when thinking about the opportunities you've let slip by. Perhaps guilt consumes you for decisions you've made or failed to make, or perhaps anxiety keeps you awake at night, as your mind runs in circles trying to find meaning in a routine that feels increasingly empty. These feelings, as uncomfortable as they may be, are not enemies. They are messengers pointing to the need for change. Yolanda Jacoby, one of the leading interpreters of Jung's work, offers a fascinating perspective on this. She suggests that neurotic sufferings, those persistent feelings of dissatisfaction, restlessness, and emotional pain, are not merely obstacles to be overcome. They are, in fact, invitations to growth. It's as if the psyche itself is pushing us out of our comfort zone, forcing us to confront the parts of ourselves we've avoided for so long. These sufferings, according to Jacoby, have a purpose: to propel us toward personal development. And here's the big question: are you listening to these signals? Are you willing to accept that these feelings, as difficult as they may be, can be the starting point for profound transformation? Because as long as we continue to ignore them or mask them with distractions, we are merely postponing the inevitable. Change doesn't happen by chance. It begins with the courage to look inward, to acknowledge the pain, and to accept it as part of the process. Recognizing the need for change is not an act of weakness, but of strength. It is admitting that, while we cannot control everything that happens in our lives, we have the power to choose how to respond. And often, that choice begins with the simple yet powerful decision to say, "I accept something needs to change." Recognizing the need for change is a crucial step, but for many, it is also the moment when fear begins to speak louder. After all, change means leaving the comfort zone, facing the unknown, and often confronting truths we would rather avoid. That's why so many people choose the opposite path, the path of escape. When negative feelings like regret, guilt, or anxiety become unbearable, the natural tendency is to seek ways to silence them, even if only temporarily. And this is where the danger lies. Drugs, alcohol, compulsive eating, excessive shopping, endless binge-watching of series, or even obsessive use of social media, all of these are forms of distraction that promise immediate relief, but actually take us further away from the solution. These escapes may work for a while, numbing the pain and creating an illusion of control, but deep down, they solve nothing. On the contrary, they keep us trapped in a cycle of stagnation, where the pain we try to avoid continues to grow silently, until it becomes unbearable. Carl Jung, once again, warns us about the danger of this behavior. He describes the safe path as the path of death. But what does this mean? Jung is not talking about literal death, but about a symbolic death, the death of our potential, our authenticity, our ability to live a full life. The safe path is the one where we avoid risks, cling to what is familiar, and refuse to face the challenges necessary for growth. It is the path where we choose immediate comfort over transformative discomfort. And by doing so, we end up disconnecting from who we truly are. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself postponing an important decision because it seemed easier to stay as you are? How many times have you used a distraction to avoid thinking about something you knew, deep down, needed to be faced? That is the safe path in action. It promises us stability, but in reality, it imprisons us in a life that doesn't satisfy us. It's like being adrift in a boat without direction, while the currents carry us further away from the destination we truly desire. The danger of avoiding change lies not only in what we lose by not acting, but also in what we accumulate. Over time, regrets, frustrations, and a growing sense that we are wasting our lives. And the longer we delay, the harder it becomes to break this cycle. Because deep down, we know that distractions are merely palliatives. They don't heal, they don't solve, and they certainly don't transform us. So, the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we willing to continue on this safe path, knowing that it leads to a symbolic death? Or are we ready to face the discomfort of change, with all its uncertainties, but also all its possibilities? Because in the end, avoiding change may seem easier in the moment, but it comes at a high price. And often the greatest risk we take is not taking any risk at all. If avoiding change is the path that leads us to stagnation, then the opposite of that, the pursuit of self-actualization, is the path that leads us to fulfillment. It is here that we begin to reconnect with our purpose, explore our potential, and build a life that truly makes sense. Abraham Maslow, one of the great figures of humanistic psychology, dedicated his life to studying what makes us truly human, and more importantly, what makes us fulfilled. For him, self-actualization is the pinnacle of the human experience, the moment when we become who we truly are, continuously and meaningfully exploring our talents, abilities, and passions. Maslow described self-actualization as a process, not a destination. It's not about reaching an end point, but about being in constant motion, always seeking to grow, learn, and develop. It is the continuous realization of our potential, the most authentic expression of who we are. And for him, this pursuit is not just a choice, it is a necessity. In his words, if you plan on being anything less than you are capable of being, you will probably be unhappy all the days of your life. This phrase is a powerful reminder that the dissatisfaction we often feel does not come from external circumstances, but from our own refusal to live up to what we know deep down we are capable of being. But what does it mean in practice to pursue self-actualization? It means looking inward and identifying what makes us feel alive. It means recognizing our talents, even those we have neglected or underestimated, and finding ways to put them into practice. It means challenging ourselves, stepping out of our comfort zone, and embracing the discomfort that comes with growth. Because, as Maslow reminds us, true happiness does not come from avoiding challenges, but from facing and overcoming them. However, the pursuit of self-actualization is not easy. It requires courage because it forces us to confront our limitations, our fears, and often the expectations others have placed upon us. It requires patience because growth is a slow and sometimes frustrating process. And it requires authenticity because we cannot fully realize ourselves while trying to be something we are not. But despite the difficulties, this pursuit is profoundly rewarding. When we commit to self-actualization, we begin to experience a sense of purpose that goes far beyond momentary pleasure. We begin to feel connected to something greater, something that gives meaning to our actions and motivates us to keep going, even in the most challenging moments. And perhaps most importantly, we begin to feel at peace with who we are because we know we are living in alignment with our values and our potential. The pursuit of self-actualization is ultimately the pursuit of a life worth living. It is the opposite of the quiet desperation Thoreau spoke of. It is the antidote to stagnation and emptiness. And while the path is challenging, it is also profoundly liberating. Because when we commit to being all that we are capable of being, we not only find happiness, we find ourselves. If the pursuit of self-actualization is the path to a fulfilling life, then purpose is the compass that guides us on this journey. Without a clear purpose, we risk getting lost amidst the distractions and demands of daily life, living reactively instead of proactively. Purpose gives direction to our actions, transforms our efforts into something meaningful, and helps us overcome the inevitable challenges along the way. Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his timeless wisdom, captured the essence of this process by saying, "Sow a thought and reap an action. Sow an action and reap a habit. Sow a habit and reap a character. Sow a character and reap a destiny." This sequence reminds us that everything begins with a thought, a spark, a desire, a vision of something greater. But for that thought to become destiny, it must be nurtured by consistent actions, which in turn become habits, shape our character, and eventually define the course of our lives. And this is where purpose comes into play. It is the initial thought that guides all the subsequent steps. Without it, our actions can become scattered. Our habits may lead us in directions we didn't consciously choose, and our destiny may end up being something we never planned. But how do we define a purpose? And more importantly, how do we choose a purpose that truly inspires us? The answer lies in choosing something that is challenging enough to pull us out of inertia, but also engaging enough to spark our curiosity. A purpose doesn't need to be grand or revolutionary, it just needs to be meaningful to you. Perhaps it's learning a new skill, starting a project that has always lingered in the back of your mind, or even improving a specific aspect of your life. What matters is that it motivates you to act, that it makes you feel like you're moving forward, even if only little by little. Choosing a challenging goal is essential because it is in the challenge that we find growth. When we set out to do something beyond what we already know or can do, we are forced to expand our limits, develop new skills, and become more resilient. At the same time, a goal that sparks curiosity keeps us engaged, giving us the energy to keep going even when things get tough. It's this combination of challenge and curiosity that turns a purpose into something powerful, something that can truly change the course of our lives. However, defining a purpose is not just about the future, it's also about the present. When we have a clear purpose, each day takes on new meaning. The small actions that once seemed insignificant now become part of something greater. Every step, no matter how small, brings us closer to our goal, and this gives us a sense of progress and fulfillment that is deeply satisfying. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of having a purpose is the impact it has on our character. When we commit to a goal, we begin to develop qualities like discipline, perseverance, and courage. Over time, these qualities become part of who we are, shaping not only what we do, but also who we become. This is how purpose not only guides us, but also transforms us. So, if you feel lost, directionless, or stuck in a routine that doesn't satisfy you, perhaps it's time to stop and reflect. What is your purpose? What inspires you, challenges you, and makes you feel alive? Because in the end, it is purpose that gives us the strength to keep going, even in the hardest moments. It is what transforms thoughts into actions, actions into habits, habits into character, and character into destiny. And when we choose a purpose that truly resonates with who we are, we don't just find direction, we find meaning. Defining a purpose is like lighting an internal flame, but it is action that keeps that flame alive. Without action, even the most inspiring purpose becomes just a vague idea, a dream that never leaves the paper. More than that, action plays a crucial role in addressing something that often paralyzes us: negative emotions. Anxiety, fear, sadness, frustration, all these feelings can seem like insurmountable barriers, but in reality, they don't have to stop us from moving forward. The key lies in understanding that action, in itself, is one of the most powerful tools for overcoming these emotions. In Morita therapy, an approach developed in Japan, there is a fundamental principle: action is the cure. This philosophy teaches us that instead of trying to control or eliminate negative emotions, we should focus on acting, even when we don't feel motivated or confident. In other words, we don't need to wait for the right emotions to appear before we start acting. On the contrary, it is often the action itself that transforms our emotional state. When we move toward our purpose, even hesitantly, we begin to create a positive cycle. Action generates progress, progress generates confidence, and confidence in turn weakens negative emotions. David Reynolds, one of the main proponents of Morita therapy in the West, reinforces this idea by emphasizing the importance of focusing on purposeful behaviors. For him, the secret is not in trying to fix our feelings directly, but in channeling our energy into actions aligned with our goals. When we do this, we allow our feelings to resolve themselves in their own time. It's as if we're telling ourselves, I acknowledge that I'm anxious or sad or afraid, but that won't stop me from doing what needs to be done. This approach frees us from the need to fight against our emotions and gives us the opportunity to move forward, even amidst internal turbulence. Think about how many times you've postponed something important because you didn't feel ready or in the mood. Maybe it was a difficult conversation, a challenging project, or even a small step toward a larger goal. Now imagine what it would be like if, instead of waiting for the perfect moment, you simply started. It doesn't matter if the first step is small or imperfect. What matters is that it's a step. And often, that's exactly what we need to break the cycle of inertia and begin transforming our emotions. This approach doesn't mean ignoring or suppressing negative feelings. On the contrary, it teaches us to accept them as a natural part of the human experience, without allowing them to define or control us. When we act with purpose, even amidst difficult emotions, we are, in fact, reaffirming our commitment to what truly matters. We are saying, I am more than my fleeting feelings. I am my actions, my values, and my purpose. What's most interesting is that by focusing on action, we often find that negative emotions begin to lose their grip. The anxiety that once felt unbearable dissolves as we engage in meaningful tasks. The fear that paralyzed us gives way to a sense of accomplishment when we realize we can move forward even with it present. And the sadness that consumed us begins to transform into hope as we see the first signs of progress. Action, therefore, is not just a means to achieve our goals. It is also a way to heal ourselves. It is a reminder that even in the most difficult moments, we have the power to choose how to respond. And when we choose to act with purpose, we are not only overcoming our negative emotions, but also moving closer to the life we truly want to live. Because in the end, it is in action that we find true transformation. Courage is the fuel that allows us to take the first step and to keep moving forward even when the path seems uncertain. Because, let's be honest, taking action is not always easy. Often we are confronted by an invisible yet powerful barrier: fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough. And in the midst of these emotions, it's tempting to wait for the fear to disappear before acting. But the truth is that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act despite it. Thomas Huxley, one of the great thinkers of the 19th century, offers us a valuable perspective on this. He argued that true education is not just about acquiring knowledge, but about developing the ability to act regardless of our feelings. In other words, emotional maturity is not about avoiding fear, anxiety, or doubt, but about learning not to be controlled by them. It's the ability to say, yes, I feel fear, but that won't stop me from doing what needs to be done. This is the essence of courage, the ability to move forward even when emotions try to pull us back. And here's something we often forget. Negative emotions are not a sign of weakness or failure. Abraham Maslow, in his studies on self-actualization, reminds us that even the healthiest and most fulfilled human beings experience negative emotions. What sets them apart is not the absence of fear, sadness, or doubt, but how they deal with these emotions. They don't let these feelings paralyze them. Instead, they see them as a natural part of the journey. Because deep down, personal growth always involves discomfort. It's impossible to expand our limits without, at some point, feeling the internal resistance that challenges us to keep going. This is where the timeless wisdom of Ralph Waldo Emerson comes in. Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. This phrase, simple and direct, contains a profound truth. Fear is often an illusion. It grows in our minds, fed by uncertainty and the anticipation of the worst possible scenario. But when we choose to face it, something extraordinary happens. Fear begins to lose its power. It doesn't disappear all at once, but each courageous action weakens it until eventually it dissolves. And in place of fear, something much more powerful emerges: confidence. Confidence in our ability to handle challenges, to learn from mistakes, and to grow from experiences. But how do we cultivate this courage to act? The answer lies in starting small. We don't need to face our biggest fears all at once. We can begin with simple yet meaningful steps that help us build the confidence needed for greater challenges. Each small victory reminds us that we are stronger than we think, that we are capable of much more than we imagine. Over time, these small acts of courage accumulate, creating momentum that takes us to places that once seemed unattainable. The courage to act is not something born from a moment of inspiration. It is something we build day by day, choice by choice. It is the decision not to let fear dictate the course of our lives. It is the willingness to face discomfort, knowing that it is within discomfort that we find growth. And above all, it is the trust that even when we fail, we are learning, evolving, and moving closer to our best selves. So if there's something you fear, something you've been avoiding because it seems scary or uncertain, remember Emerson's words, do the thing you fear. Because in the end, courage is not just about overcoming fear, it's about discovering what lies on the other side of it. And often, what we find on the other side is the life we've always wanted to live. If courage propels us to act, there's an even deeper force that can motivate us to live with purpose and intensity, the awareness of our own mortality. Although death is a topic many prefer to avoid, it is, paradoxically, one of the greatest sources of clarity and inspiration we can find. The Stoics, ancient philosophers, understood this masterfully. For them, the brevity of life was not something to fear but to embrace. It was a constant reminder that time is finite and therefore precious. This perspective, known as memento mori, remember that you will die, was not an invitation to despair but to action. It was a call to live each day with intention, as if it were the last, because one day it will be. The Stoics believed that by reflecting on death, we become more aware of what truly matters. Trivial concerns, distractions, and the fears that paralyze us begin to lose their power when confronted with the reality that our time here is limited. This awareness challenges us to ask, if I knew today was my last day, how would I live? What would I do? What would I let go of? These questions, though uncomfortable, have the power to reconnect us with what is essential, reminding us that life should not be wasted on regrets or inertia. Steve Jobs, one of the greatest visionaries of our time, also understood the transformative power of this reflection. In an iconic speech, he shared how the awareness of death shaped his life and choices. He said, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important." This perspective is incredibly liberating. When we remember that our time is limited, we gain the courage to let go of what no longer serves us, be it toxic relationships, purposeless careers, or fears that keep us stuck. Death, instead of being a frightening end, becomes a catalyst for life. It challenges us to live authentically, to pursue what truly makes us happy, and to leave a legacy that reflects who we truly are. But this reflection is not just about big choices or decisive moments. It's also about how we live our everyday lives. The awareness of death invites us to value the small moments, a sunset, a meaningful conversation, a gesture of kindness. It reminds us that life is not just about achieving goals or accomplishing great feats, but about being present here and now with gratitude for what we have. However, living with this intensity requires courage. It demands that we face the reality that time is passing, whether we are ready or not. It requires us to accept that we have no control over how much time we have left, but we do have control over how we choose to live it. And above all, it requires us to commit to not postponing life for someday in the future. Because someday may never come. So how can we use this reflection to motivate ourselves? It starts with a simple question. If I knew my time was short, what would I do differently today? Perhaps you reconnect with a dream you've set aside. Perhaps you forgive someone or ask for forgiveness. Perhaps you simply decide to enjoy the present moment more instead of worrying about what is beyond your control. What matters is that this awareness drives us to act, to live with greater purpose, and to value each day as the gift it truly is. In the end, death is not just an end. It is a reminder that life is precious precisely because it is fleeting. And by embracing this truth, we find the motivation to live not only more intensely, but also more meaningfully. Because, as the Stoics and Steve Jobs taught us, it is by remembering that we are mortal that we discover what it truly means to be alive. Throughout this journey, we have explored the depths of the quiet desperation that Thoreau so brilliantly described and how it manifests in our modern lives. We've seen how the lack of purpose, the avoidance of negative emotions, and the fear of taking action can trap us in an existence that feels empty, disconnected, and directionless. But we've also discovered that, even in the face of this reality, there is a path to transformation, a path that requires courage, action, and the willingness to face life with authenticity. In the end, the choice to walk this path or remain in stagnation is entirely ours. Yolanda Jacoby, in interpreting Carl Jung's teachings, warns us about the consequences of not pursuing personal development. She reminds us that ignoring the signs of dissatisfaction, avoiding the discomfort of change, and settling for a life that does not reflect our true potential comes at a high price. This price is not just the loss of opportunities or the feeling of regret. It is the disconnection from ourselves. It is living a life that, while functional on the surface, lacks meaning and depth. It is ultimately the symbolic death of who we could become, and that is precisely why the safe path, the one that avoids risks, challenges, and discomfort, is, as Jung warned us, the path of death. Not a physical death, but the death of our spirit, our authenticity, and our capacity to grow and transform. Choosing the safe path may seem tempting in the moment, but in the long run, it condemns us to a life of regrets and what-ifs. And perhaps there is nothing more painful than looking back and realizing we wasted the time we were given. But there is an alternative. There is the path of courage, purpose, and action. It is the path that requires us to face our fears, to accept our negative emotions as part of the process, and to commit to living in alignment with our values and potential. This path is not easy. It is filled with uncertainties, challenges, and moments of doubt. But it is also the only path that leads to fulfillment, authenticity, and a life truly worth living. And deep down, isn't that what we all seek? Not just to exist, but to live. Not just to get through the days, but to fill them with meaning. Not just to survive, but to thrive. And for that, we must remember that transformation doesn't happen by chance. It requires effort, intention, and above all, courage. Courage to look inward, to recognize what needs to change, and to act even when fear and doubt try to hold us back. So, the question remains, which path will you choose? The safe path, which promises immediate comfort but robs you of your authenticity? Or the path of courage, which challenges you to grow, transform, and live fully? The choice is yours, and it begins now, in this moment. Because in the end, life is short. And as the Stoics remind us, it is precisely this brevity that makes it so precious. There are no guarantees about how much time we have, but there is one certainty. The time we have is now, and it is up to us to decide how we will use it. So, let us choose the path that leads to our best selves, that connects us with our purpose, and that allows us to live with courage, authenticity, and meaning. After all, as we've seen, it is by facing life head-on that we discover what it truly means to be alive. Now that we've reached the end of this journey, the most important question you can ask yourself is, what will you do with all of this? Because deep down, all the knowledge, all the reflection, and all the inspiration we've explored here will only have real value if they are transformed into action. Personal transformation doesn't happen in the realm of ideas alone. It requires movement, choices, and, above all, commitment. And that is exactly what I want to invite you to do now. Reflect deeply on your life and take the first step toward your self-transformation. Take a moment to think. Are you living the life you truly want? Are you exploring your full potential? Or do you feel stuck in a routine that doesn't reflect who you are? Are you facing your fears and challenges with courage, or have you chosen the safe path that, deep down, only keeps you stagnant? These are difficult questions, but they are essential, because, as we've seen, change begins with acceptance. Acceptance that something needs to change, that you deserve more, and that it is possible to build a life more aligned with your values and dreams. But reflection alone is not enough. You need to act. And acting doesn't mean transforming your entire life at once. It means starting small, but starting now. Maybe it's setting aside a few minutes of your day to think about what truly matters to you. Maybe it's writing down your goals and identifying the first step you can take toward them. Maybe it's facing a fear you've been avoiding, or simply committing to being more present in the moment. What matters is that you do something, anything, that moves you in the direction of your purpose. And remember, transformation is not a one-time event. It is a continuous process. There will be days when you feel motivated and confident, and others when fear and doubt try to take over. But it is precisely in those moments that you need to remember everything we've explored here. Remember that action is the cure for negative emotions. Remember that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And above all, remember that time is finite, and each day is a unique opportunity to get closer to the life you desire. So, here's the challenge. Today, before the day ends, do something that brings you closer to your best self. It can be a small step, but let it be an intentional step, aligned with what you truly want for yourself. And if you feel like you need an extra push, share in the comments what that step will be. Declare your commitment, inspire others, and perhaps find support in the community that is here, watching this video with you. And if this content resonated with you, if it awakened something within you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone you believe also needs to hear this message. Because sometimes all a person needs to start their own journey of transformation is a word, an idea, or a reminder that they are not alone. Life is short, but it is full of possibilities. And the choice of how you will live it is ultimately in your hands. So why not start now? Why not take the first step toward the life you know, deep down, you deserve to live? Transformation begins with a decision, and that decision can be made today.